Hi, performers and achievers. Welcome to Performers and Achievers Daily with me, Raj Gavurla. In today's episode, I'm talking about your routine, reward, and process over outcomes, over end results or results over win. So what does that mean? It means that regardless of whom you are or what organization you're with, business, team, anything, any endeavor you do, right? You're not able to control the outcome. You definitely can influence the outcome. However, you're not able to control the outcome. You're not able to control the result or the end result. You're not able to control the expectation. You're not able to control the win, right? Those are all end result things or initiatives that can't really be controlled. However, what you can control and what you can become more effective and efficient at that, and if you like the word improve, then use the word improve, or if you like some other words, then use those words. So your routine, and that routine needs to reward you in some fashion. So, for example, what I do when I do my routine for my reward, in addition to whatever it is I'm doing, and obviously I'm doing my routine and I'm being rewarded as I'm doing it because that's part of the process. However, I'll take a moment when I have a break or even while I'm executing, right? Execution over outcome. So routine, reward, and process execution over outcomes or end results or win or expectations. You can control those items. So you may be in a situation where you already know what the routine is, you know, the reward, you know, the process, right? Those things are known. However, what you really don't know is what's going to happen at the end. And you have some, let's say, benchmarks or things that you're shooting for, your key performance indicators, key performance metrics, all of those, right? Those are known. However, without a few things, you can only go so far. And that is, are you practically gaining a, and this can be done in lots of ways, knowledge and skill to apply, implement and apply. Because eventually you'll max out. You're not able to go any faster. And if people insist you go any faster or quicker or however else it is, it's just going to cause stress, anxiety, nervousness, frustration. And then when that happens, then people have their threshold. Okay, they're going to start to probably do things that are out of character for them, like start using profanity or start telling someone they have attitude, and it's just going to escalate. Instead, when that occurs, it should actually be the opposite. Get calmer. And so this leadership environment culture you're experiencing, obviously it's not so good because it's causing these conflicts. And these conflicts, they affect a lot of things. They affect people's health and wellness, which is priority number one for anyone. Not only your health and wellness, but your health and wellness is your priority. Also, though, you probably have family, extended family, friends, citizens, and others, and their health and wellness is also priority to them. And you, although your health and wellness is your priority, you're also affected by other people. So the number of call outs, for example, will decrease when you don't have this kind of stressful anxiety, nervousness, frustration, frustrating environment. It's not sustainable. And so those are the ways to do that. Practical listening, practical learning, to gain practical knowledge and a practical skill. And eventually it will tap out unless you introduce some additional knowledge or skill, or you make that routine, you maybe prioritize and put it in a different way. And so, for example, instead of having a pebble in your shoe, now the pebble's out just by prioritizing that routine. And a lot of times the prioritization is done based on a lot of real-time factors. It's not always the same routine based on a lot of factors, right? And you can see this in lots of areas. And of course, you can see this in areas where there's good teamwork involved and there's performance metrics and they're looking to achieve a specific target or a specific performance metric, whether that's accuracy, time, all of those kind of factors. However, without that or implementing some new technology, right? New technology, then it's not sustainable. Now, when you do that, though, it's definitely sustainable. It actually makes everything effective, efficient, and easier as your work and good teamwork occurs. And so you can look at the routine. You can look at the reward. Regardless of what you're compensating or paying someone, they can only go so fast or be as accurate as they can be with their current knowledge and skills. Practical listening, practical learning, practical seeing, practical knowledge, practical skill. However, the reward, there's ways to do the reward because you're a person, you're an individual. You're not able to go at that pace all day long. It's just not possible. So one way to do that is by complimenting yourself with the word good. So your positive self-talk, when you get to a certain spot, you acknowledge it by just thinking or having the thought or the thought process or thinking process, or positive self-talk was just rewarding yourself with the word good because you're already compensated, you're already paid. So we know what needs to be done or what we're performing and achieving towards. So we're able to do that. Now, when you compliment yourself with good, because no one else is going to compliment yourself, right? They might, someone might say something positive motivational skill or something, but he might be able to positively inspire. However, it's sometimes challenging because it's sort of like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's your job. That's your role. That's your position, etc. Right? And they may try to justify it as he or she knows that, right? However, well-placed, positive, motivational skill will keep the workflow going. Will keep the efficiency and effectiveness going. Also, positive, inspirational skill will also do that. However, if people start breaking down to you have attitude or profanity and it starts escalating because they're stressed, frustrated, nervous, anxious, performance anxiety, whatever it may be, then it's not sustainable. And so that's one way to do it is just by complimenting yourself with the word good. Good. You don't need to say it out loud. You could say it out loud. That acknowledgement, whether it's silently to yourself or even out loud, good. Because you already have the knowledge, you already have the skill. So what are the different performance variables? Well, the different performance variables is that you're a person, you're an individual. And every day, you're not going to be as sharp as on some days. There's too many factors. Most of the days you're consistent and you always will be. However, there's times when it's just challenging. We can't control the outputs and we only have so much control, and we do have control though of the routine, the reward, and that the process and the execution. So keep that in mind. So look at your place of work, your workplace, your business, your organization, your team. This could not be applied to anything in your family, extended families, when you're doing something, playing sports, obviously, right? One team's congruent and the other team's trying to do what? They're trying to stop the other team, right? That's reality. However, you can simplify. And the way you do it is by you look at your routine, the reward, and process execution. You look at those things and you talk about those things instead of talking about the win, the expectations, the outcomes, the results, because you can't really control that. Sure, before you go into playing a match, a game, sure you want to win. We all know that. You need to win. You like to win. However, it doesn't matter. You can't really control that part. You really can't. You're going to need to do your routine, reward, and process execution. And as you do that, what happens? You gain all the things that get you closer and closer instead of chasing that win, chasing that outcome, chasing the result. It's actually coming towards you. And as you do that, you receive that extra boost of a lot of things, lots of neurotransmitters, confidence, which has several things involved in that. And of course, the mental preparation. If you didn't see the previous episode on my podcast, listen to that. Mental preparation. Without mental preparation, you won't be as effective and efficient. Your routine won't either. and reward and your process execution. And then as you go through that, well, how do you reflect on different ways of, are you able to talk about the routine? Are you able to talk about the reward? Are you able to talk about process execution? All of those three things being executed. And you're not necessarily able to do it in real time. However, when you reflect and you even discuss that, talk about it. Because most of the time it's communication and delegation. Is what's clearly not occurring. And there's lots of examples. You could tell someone to go get something out of some place, and they do. However, you only wanted one of the things and not two. Or you could tell someone to do something, and they start doing it, and you have the priority for you is to do it in this order, not in the other order. So you talk about those things. Those aren't things to get mad about. Those aren't things to get stressed out about, anxiety, nervousness, frustrated about. These are actually an opportunity to get calmer and be able to really empathize, right? Empathize with the situation. Because most likely it is a communication and delegation. And it's not either side, right? Because both sides are thinking, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing it the right way. So it's not necessarily that you're pointing out that, it's that talking to each other, discussing it with each other is important, right? Instead of stressing out, anxiety, nervousness, frustration, profanity, telling someone they have attitude, anything else. And you'll see also, and pay close attention to this. This is actually your bonus. Your assignment is you watch, and as you watch, and you'll even know this about yourself, you'll acknowledge it, is that there are ways that you reset so that you can go to the next, let's say, priority, right? Because it's really about priority tasks, right? So depending upon what type of business you're in or what you're doing, there's a priority task, right? So in customer service, the priority is serving the customer, helping each other to serve the customer, or working with each other, working together, good teamwork to serve our customer. So that's very important. And so it's essential that in this assignment that I have for you, that you acknowledge where you, you're one of the teammates, one of the colleagues, coworker, partner, anything else, member, whatever you call yourselves, that are working together, having good teamwork. Acknowledge, and you do this, each person does. Acknowledge where you reset. And how do you do that? How do you do that? You do that by stretching, right? All your people are not all, they all have their different unique situation. So, for example, when there's a little bit of a break, somebody might do something that's to stretch because they do other things when they're not in the workplace. And so it helps to loosen them up, and you can see them doing something, right? You can see them trying to do stuff. Then other people, what do? They do other things. They'll talk about whatever they want to talk about. They'll talk about things, regardless of what it is. Just randomly talk about things because that's their way of resetting, or one of their ways. And you can acknowledge this about yourself. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Some people do it more than one way because, again, it's important to have a different skills to be able to do that. Some days, some people are more quiet than other days. Some days it's like, I need to pump myself up. I need, a little more juice, excitement, energy. I'm structured. I'm self-disciplined. I'm organized, right? So your employees, they are really working. That I know as an owner, as a executive, and as a director, manager, VP, supervisor, trainer, you're in HR, you're in whatever you're in, your players, your coaches, your front office, general manager, investor team, investment group, ownership team. I mean, everybody really is working. They really are. And it's not that someone is not as effective and efficient. Your What makes good teamwork is your capabilities to be able to look at the routine, reward, process, execution, all of that as an execution. And then be able to acknowledge different ways that people reset, right? Some people may get there 30 minutes early because they like to just come in and calm and they don't want to be rushed. Some people may be the opposite. They like to get there right on time, right? For whatever reason, that's the way that that's part of their routine. Some people afterwards or during, they're really quiet. They're not really looking to talk. I mean, they may be even like silently just calming themselves internally and breathing. And you can't really see that they're breathing. However, that's very important. Your breath. Because again, it's not sustainable. You can do that for depending upon what it is and depending upon what kind of good teamwork there is and how many people there are. You can do that. Maybe for a couple of hours. However, after that, again, it's not sustainable. You just can't go at that pace. And so that's very important. So remember, your bonus assignment is to acknowledge the way you reset. And then watch the people you're working with, your teammates, your colleagues, your partners, members, whomever it is you're with, your coaches, everyone, front office, whenever you all are doing something together, working together, you have a little bit of a reset and acknowledge it. You're already doing it. Some people will think of something funny, right? Something clean, funny. Some people, they'll say something positive, skillful motivation. And what does that do? adds a little bit of energy, a boost to what it is that's being worked on. Or just acknowledge, right? Like good teamwork. Hey, there's no line. Or hey, we got close to scoring on that one. Just acknowledge all of that. You're acknowledging the effort. You're acknowledging the the routine, the reward, the process execution. And eventually, what happens? Goal, score, ace, and you receive that key performance metric. You may even set a record. However, you don't go into it trying to set a record because that's one way to be injured because you're focusing all your cognitive resources, right, on the outcome. And therefore, you're not as effective and efficient. And so that's what I have for you today is to think about, use your critical thinking skills in real time, right? There's lots of different mental skills to use to do this so that when you do have good teamwork, there's routine, there's reward, there's process, and all of that's executed or execution over any of the outcomes because that's what makes you successful. That's what makes it succeeding. That's what makes it enjoyable at times. That makes it fun at times. That's what makes people happy at times. That's what makes people like the camaraderie, working together, being together. And it's not just a matter of, oh no, we don't work good together because but I work good with them. No, that's not real. Now that's like a way to not show good teamwork, actually. You're supposed to be able to bring other people in. People come in, each of them is unique and different. Each one of them. Each one of them brings their identity, right? They bring their identity. They come from different backgrounds. They were raised differently. They have different situations outside the home. All of those things matter, right? So that's important. They have different learning, different knowledge, different skills, different experiences, different wisdom. However, it's by doing this, right? Good teamwork, routine, reward, process, execution. It's what makes it effective, efficient, and easier. And so that's very important for you. So take a look at that in however way it applies to you, whomever you work with or partner with or teammates with, your customers, investors, whomever it is. And take a look at those items. And obviously you work on those. However, are you aware of those? And when you're aware of those, do you have ways to reflect? And do you have ways to acknowledge and reset? And that's what's sustainable. And that's what succeeding is. It's not the outcome. I see a lot of coaches, players, they talk about, yeah, we didn't win, a terrible game, or it's not so good. We need to do this, we need to do that. And I'm like thinking to the coach or to the player, like, look at all the successes you had there. You succeeded a lot. Sure, you might not have gotten to win, but look at all of that success, succeeding. What was done that was more good? And then their point of view is like, yeah, well, it was good to see XYZ do this or that. And, it was good to see that this occurred. And I like the way that they did that, and that was something that we didn't even really work on. It just happened in the flow of the match or the game, and sometimes you just let the players do their thing, right? Sometimes that occurs. Because the priorities based on the situation, they're always moving around. However, the number one priority, number one, is your health and wellness. Keep you healthy and well. And so, a priority should be your exercise program, whatever it may be, and nutrition, right? Proper amount of sleep, proper amount of rejuvenation, rest. And yes, when you can, you increase the reward, right? People appreciate that. They're not just there because they're compensated and paid. No, they want a positive leadership environment and culture. They want appreciation, whether that's verbally, and sometimes they just need to know how to do that and be thankful to themselves by just complimenting themselves with good as they do one thing or another. Right? However, many of them, would like to have, let's say, another raise or promotion or apply for another position or grow sustainably grow. And that's how you sustainably grow, sustainably develop, and sustainably evolve. That's important. And you watch when you implement something like this, whomever you are, you yourself will have more of everything. That's good. Because you're seeing people, and that's what it's about, people, individuals, and they have families, extended families, friends, citizens, and others. And you're seeing that, well, there's not as many call outs. There's not as much conflict. Because conflict does affect each other's health and wellness. It really does. Right? It can. And, obviously the worst is when it becomes toxic, then no one's going to be there. That's when people it's like, no, this isn't good for my health wellness. This is not the way it should be. This is not a positive leadership environment and culture. And that's when real good employees, good partners, good players, coaches, whomever, investors, whomever, they will leave. And so that's very important for you to look at that. Because that's what really excites you, is when you see people you're working with, including you, succeeding, enjoying, having fun, happy, joyful, achieving, performing, accomplishing things, gaining knowledge, gaining skills, gaining wisdom, growing in their sustainably growing, sustainably developing, sustainably evolving in their own way, because each one is different and unique. And that's where it's all about. Now, can it be fun the whole time? No, it's not sustainable. Can it be enjoyable the whole time? No, it's not sustainable. Can each and everyone be happy the whole time? No, it's not sustainable. However, there's a myriad of things, right? Adjectives, descriptions, vibrancy, energy, all of those things at times, we're enjoying, fun, happy, vibrant, energetic, excited, right? And the more of those that are positive, motivational, skillful, positive, inspirational, skillful. More and more of that, and pull out all the others, then that becomes more and more sustainable. And then that's when all those things that are important that you don't have any control about, the probability, the percentage, the likeliness of those occurring occur. And actually, regardless of what happens, you're experiencing and feeling successful, succeeding, right? That's what's most important. It's what you all did together, what you all experienced together, right? The camaraderie, the working together, talking with each other. And sure, it's important to talk about things that are relevant and relatable when you're not in a silo, right? When you have family outside, and that it's important as you get to know each other, you start talking or sharing about your family or extended family, friends, what's happening in the community. Maybe you went to some play, or you went somewhere else, or who knows, you experienced something. Sure, that's how you make authentic connections with people, because then they realize what? That you're a person, you're an individual, right? However, there are times when you compartmentalize, right? And we all know when those times are. There are those times. However, it's not sustainable to compartmentalize the whole time. That's just not sustainable. So that's what I have for you today. If you like my podcast, like it and make a comment in the comment section. For those of you interested in my private, personal, professional, confidential services and programs, visit my website, rajgavurla.com. Fill out the brief form, and we will contact you as soon as we can. Enjoy your day.